And welcome to the second day of the 10th Bosphorus Summit, organized with the theme, Towards a New World Order. Now, we have a very comprehensive agenda, as you may have noticed, so I'd like to start right away with our first session. The title of this first session is New Dynamics and Global Trends of Forced Migration. We will start with a keynote speech, followed by a panel discussion. So for the keynote speech, I would like to invite Mr. FAISAL Al-Fayez, President of the Senate of Jordan. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This time last year, from this forum, I addressed the issue of migration and the rising phenomena of refugees and forced displacement. By forced displacement, I specifically refer to the expulsion of the Palestinian people more than 7 decades ago, as well as the many cases of forced migration resulting from civil wars, where large waves of otherwise settled populations in their homeland had to flee violence in search for safe refuge elsewhere. Once out of home, those refugees obviously face cruel living conditions, dangers, difficult circumstances, suffering, uncertainty, and humiliation that may last for years, if not decades. This phenomena is not new. Throughout history, many people worldwide have been subjected to forced migration due to continued conflicts and war. Last year, I focused on the humanitarian aspect of the refugee issue that had been escalating in our region and where my country, Jordan, has been specifically affected. The unique reality is that Jordan had been a favorite place for refuge since the kingdom gained its independence in 1946. I spoke last year about the exemplary Jordanian experiment in handling one refugee wave after another for the last 7 decades. I may have to remind you once more that the first wave of Palestinian refugees arrived in Jordan during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. That was followed by another Palestinian wave during the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. A third wave resulted from the 1991 Gulf War, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinian workers and employees in the Gulf countries had to return to Jordan and settle there. This clearly indicates that once people are forced to migrate, they hardly know when or if they would ever return to where they belong. The Palestinians who were forced to leave their secure towns and villages in Palestine in the late 40s of the last century as a result of the Zionist invasion of their homeland believed they would probably return home once that war was over, within weeks or months at the latest. They are still waiting. Jordan hosts more than 2 million Palestinians awaiting international justice and UN action to enable them to return to their original homeland. During the 1991 Gulf War, Jordan had to receive more than 1 million Iraqi refugees. And as a result of successive crises and wars in our region, Jordan remained a desired place for refuge, for being not just an oasis of peace, safe and secure life, but also for the favorable and humanitarian conditions Jordan offered the newcomers, regardless of their faith, ethnicity, or origin. Additionally, Jordan still hosts close to 1.3 million Syrian refugees, while the situation in neighboring Syria awaits final settlement. Only very few of them were able to return. We make sure that our refugee guests are supplied with all their needs, particularly education and health, in the same manner as Jordanians are, as well as treating them with respect and dignity. Despite our limited resources and lack of international assistance, the cost actually, until the end of 2017, this is from 2011 until 2017, on our strained budget is over 10 billion US dollars. As a result, our national debt has risen sharply. That is to say nothing about the resulting security challenges and the cost involved as well. Unfortunately, the international community has shouldered only a quarter of this cost. While we expect the international community to shoulder its responsibilities towards Jordan in this particular respect, we also urge the UN to do more by way of finding solutions to the conflicts and the crises that force people to leave their homes in search for safety elsewhere. It is time that the international community places the worldwide refugee problem at the top of its priorities, try harder to put an end for the abnormal phenomena, and offer adequate assistance to host countries. So far, only the symptoms and consequences of the migration problem are being treated, not the root causes. It is absolutely necessary that the many conflicts behind the problem of migration are addressed at the United Nations as a basic priority. The purpose should focus on the root causes, not just the consequences. Just let me elaborate on this point, if you allow me, please. Now, when the Arab Spring started in 2011, I think Arab youths were asking for democracy and freedom. But unfortunately, the regional powers and the international powers, unfortunately, they have interfered in these crises. And this has led, unfortunately, also to civil wars in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen, and other parts of the Arab world. Now, the question is, who is funding and who is arming? If, for example, there is an international will to find a solution to these crises, I think they will, if they lift up their hands from these countries, they are interfering in their internal affairs. Unfortunately, there are regional powers and world powers interfering in these crises and creating more problems and leading to more refugees leaving these countries to other parts of the world. It is quite regrettable to realize that the UN organization that was created in 1946 with the primary goal of resolving international disputes by peaceful and negotiable means away from military action and violence did not achieve convincing and successful results. The depressing reality is that conflicts are on the rise, and so are the dangerous trends of extremism, sectarianism, radicalization, hatred, ethnic conflicts, and outright terrorism. One might ask, why did the UN fail in resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict for so long, allowing it to create massive complications and instability for more than 7 decades? The same can be said about the recent Syrian, Iraqi, Libyan, and the Yemeni crisis. That is only to refer to crises in our region, while there are many more in other important parts of the world. The failure to resolve such crises has resulted in continued wars and suffering, huge costs in blood and treasure, destruction, migration, and spreading political instability. I do not have the exact figures for refugees in our region or elsewhere in the world, but they are definitely huge. And yet that did not seem enough to prompt the international community or the influential world powers to exercise adequate political will to seriously address the migration problem and its root causes. Addressing the root causes should not be at the expense of dealing with the humanitarian aspect. They should go together. Addressing refugee needs remains an international duty as well as a humanitarian and a moral obligation on all of us. The UN, however, should pay due attention to its duty in resolving the conflicts that force people to escape for safety. The phenomena should end, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. El-Fayez. Could you please remain on stage? I missed you because Ms. ESRA ÖZSÜER would like to present you with a plaque of appreciation, and we'll have a photo taken as well. Thank you very much, sir. And the floor is yours, Mrs. ÖZSÜER.
Günaydın, merhaba herkese. Good morning, and welcome to our panel this morning. Mr. FAYEZ, thank you for joining us again. Thank you for being always beside us and supporting our panel. What an honor to have you, and it's been a pleasure again to hear the situation and the recent situation in Jordan. Dear guests, it gives me a great pleasure to be here today representing Maya Foundation. It's a humanitarian actor. I welcome today to thank today's moderator and panelists. We have a particularly diverse group, and today we have a cosmonaut, an artist, a genocide survivor, a Nobel Prize nominee, a journalist along with humanitarians, people working in the field, researching and working towards a social cohesion. They each bring valuable experience, knowledge, a unique perspective. We are all here to learn and share ideas. And the topic on forced migration, it is happening now, and it may be expected to unfold in the near future. As the host of this panel, I will begin by sharing my personal experiences and thoughts as the president of Maya Foundation. Maya Vakfı was founded in 2014 with a vision of productive society open to exploration, devoted to helping minds, and filled with healthy individuals to have a free and safe childhood. We work towards a vision for mental health and psychosocial and support trauma. And the trauma we do is trauma rehabilitation that we provide for Turkish citizens, and we also provide for the refugees who live in Turkey. Maya Foundation believes that all people deserve to live humanely and have hope for the future. So trauma is very complex. I doubt that you will find anyone who has been forcibly displaced and who has not been affected by traumatic experiences before, during, and after, who have fled to relative safety. Imagine yourselves going through that experience. Indeed, I know some of you in this room who have found yourselves in this position. On a recent trip to Urfa lately, where 1/5 of the population is refugees from Syria, to visit our trauma-informed school program, I was very humbled by a teacher who thanked me for establishing our trauma-informed school program. She held my hand and she wouldn't release it. I was really touched by her thanking me that we were providing with mental health and how much more support there was for mental health in that region. And I think that not only in that region, in every region in Turkey, there is trauma and more support is needed for trauma rehabilitation. And the challenges are that all the break and heartbreaking stories of the children are also giving the area for secondary trauma. So this conversation left me over with an opposing feeling of really heartbreaking emotions, and also an optimistic feeling that we can provide more. We can really work all together to really reach out for more. But also, I was dismayed. Why? Because I can't understand why at this age, why now today, despite all the knowledge that we have gathered, we're experiencing the highest rate of refugee migration ever known. How is it possible that we continue to allow so many people continue to suffer from disruption? What are the current driving factors behind forced migration, and what are the solutions? Humans moving cross borders have long shaped our world. Today, more people than ever are on the move. Studies from the past 50 years on international migration help us understand why people make the choice to leave and where they go. Planned migration benefits both origin and destination countries. At the same time, unplanned and disorderly migration can be disastrous for migrants and host countries. Resources are strained and host countries come under stress. Human trafficking increases, vulnerable people are exploited, and local laws are undermined. Less than 10% of these people on the move are forced to flee. Yet, the numbers of people that are forced to migrate are still staggering. This year alone, unprecedented 70.8 million people have been forcibly displaced worldwide, and 2019 is not done yet. Popular speech tends to call them all refugees, and while tens of millions of people do live under legal protection refugee status, and those that do not fall under the definition provided, the 1951 Refugee Convention have no clear legal path to asylum, which raises challenges for societies around the world. The challenges do not end there. There are new shifting causes for migration. Many forcibly displaced people around the world do not easily fit within the formal categories defined under 1951 Convention. Formerly, newly identified, different drivers forced migration that exist today include religious, national, social, political persecution, war, conflict, gender, sexual orientation, hunger, economic, and climate change. Data from the United Nations International Migrant Stock show that forced displacements across international borders continue to rise. Between 2010 and 2017, the global number of refugee and asylum seekers increased by about 13 million, accounting for those to a quarter of increase in the number of all international migrants. All of this means that migration today is both a top developmental, migrational, and humanitarian priority. We need an approach that advances the potential benefits of migration to aid development, harness economic potential, and tackle exploitation of vulnerable populations. We need to end the violent crime and extremism and work at inclusive growth and development for communities living in extreme poverty. As the refugee population has changed, so too has the need for more inclusive definition and what defines a refugee and preventative measures to decrease the change of being forcibly displaced. The movement of people between countries in an increasingly interconnected global culture and economy, peppered with conflict and disruption, will continue to grow. These dynamics are part of long-term global trends. I ask everyone here to continue to have empathy for those who cannot remain at home and to support them in their adjustments. But I ask that we work all together and to lessen the reason they are forced to have. We can step up and combine efforts and to maximize the positive impacts and opportunities of migration. Today, the main essence is the human factor. As long as we recognize the human-based core issue, we will find and deliver solutions. I'm turning the floor over to our panelists to delve deeper solutions and discuss these questions. But before I do, I would like to share one of the stories of a little girl called Mariam. She's one of our little girls in our facility. She's been taking one of our services. And I also would like to share that today it's Mariam's story. Tomorrow it could be Yosiko, it could be Hans, it could be Michelle's story. But all we need is love. And I'm grateful for all of you to be here listening to us, sharing the stories. And I hope that we're going to be all together in this. Thank you.
أنا بحب نهار بنسوي صناديق بغبي كل ذكرياتي فيه. أنا اسمي مريم عمري 12 سنة. أنا بحب مركز بحب النشاطات بمركز مايا. بحب كل ما بدقونا بحس إني فرحانة كتير من جوا. عشان قبل ما أجي بالمركز من لما كنت صغيرة كنت يعني حلمي إني بس أفوت على الجامعة يصير عندي أصحاب ولا ما بيصير بيتعاملوا معي هيك. بس يعني بتركي أنا زاد كل حلمي. بحب مركز مايا كتير. يعني هسه نهار بقعد بالصبح أمي بتقول إني دقوا مركز مايا وفيه نشاط. أنا كتير بنبسط. بس يعني هسه النهار بخاف إني بتأخر على الموعد مشان هيك ما بلبس شي بسرعة بركض. بحب أقول لغيري إنه يجي على مركز مايا. عملني مركز مايا كتير حلو. ما بحب أعي في المدرسة. عمل المدرسة بتعلم كل شي.
Thank you very much, Ms. ÖZSÜER, very touching. And moving right on to our panel, I'd like to invite our moderator, TRT World presenter, Mr. IMRAN GARDA. Welcome. And as our moderator takes a seat, I'll invite our panelists, starting with Mr. HALİL ALTINDERE, artist from Turkey. Mr. SHARIF BANNA, founder of One Family from the UK. Dr. Cecilia ELWORTHY, founder of Oxford Research Group from the UK. Mr. MUHAMMED AHMED FARIS, astronaut and activist from Syria. Ms. KATHARINA LUMPP, UNHCR representative from Turkey. Ms. Marie-Christine NIBAGWIRE, founder of Saferefugerwanda. And Ms. NIGAR GÖKSEL, project director of International Crisis Group. The floor is yours, and we have 45 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I thank you to Maya Vakfe for inviting me to moderate this panel and this session as well. I sincerely appreciate it. We have 45 minutes, so I do believe that the best thing I can do is to stay out of the way as much as possible, because you've come to listen to the expertise of a diverse range of panelists, as we've heard, from astronauts to humanitarians to people involved in trying to put out political fires in the region to humanitarians and so on. And this is the interesting thing when we talk about refugees and migrants. I mean, most people don't even agree on who's a refugee and who's a migrant. And this is not just in terms of the man on the street. This is at the very highest levels of power. And that's part of the problem. And as I said, I want to stay out of the way as much as possible. But in trying to tee this up a little bit, I'm reminded of somebody I had met in Lampedusa a few years ago who was an African migrant or refugee in a detention center on Lampedusa. And this character, Abdi, was from Somalia. He had escaped Somalia and made it down to South Africa. And he went down to South Africa and he was forced out of South Africa by xenophobic violence. And then he went all the way up to Libya over a period of time. And the revolution happened in Libya. And the revolutionaries, while embarking on a noble mission to oust Gaddafi, locked him up because they thought he was a Gaddafi mercenary. And they tortured him. And he went from there onto a boat to Europe, to Lampedusa. And so when we talk about solving the root causes of Abdi's problem, we have to solve Somalia, we have to solve South Africa, we have to solve Libya, and we have to solve Italy and Europe as well, because they had him in a detention center and they didn't want to let him onto the continent. So with that in mind, I think that when we look in a granular way at everybody's individual story, it always becomes more complicated. And that's why I'm looking forward to talking to everybody here. Maybe we won't have many solutions at the end of this 45 minutes, but we'll have food for thought and we'll be able to weave in some different perspectives to be able to give ourselves a greater understanding of how to solve this fundamentally crucial issue in our day and age, and something that involves the political, the humanitarian, the psychological. It involves every single aspect of what makes us human. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. I understand that Halil Bey, you will be speaking in Turkish. During his answers, he will be speaking in Turkish, so your headset would be useful at that point in time if you don't understand Turkish. And I also understand Muhammad Ahmed would also be speaking in Arabic during his contributions. So use your headsets as and when it applies. I want to begin with Marie-Christine NIBAGWIRE, who's the founder of Safe Refuge Rwanda. And the reason I want to begin with you, ma'am, is because you're here in Istanbul, you're here in the region. It is clear that there is a humanitarian and migration crisis at the moment in the Mediterranean, whether we're talking about from North Africa across into Europe, or we're talking about the Balkan route, from people, for example, from Syria, some trying to make it to Europe, some making it to Turkey as a place of refuge, to Jordan, to Lebanon, and so on. We've got the focus on the refugee crisis around the world. Mm-hmm. You're somebody who's a genocide survivor. You're somebody who was in the middle of one of the most, when we look back at it, it was just 20 years ago, but it's almost unfathomable, the amount of violence, the amount of killing, the amount of displacement that took place back in Rwanda at that time. When you hear people talk about the refugee situation here, how much of it is close to home for you? How much of a parallel is there for you, ma'am?
Thank you all for having me, and thank you for asking me that question. I'm happy to share with you my experience, not a horrible experience for you to carry, but also the lessons I got from there, which I believe would help many of you. There has been a genocide. I survived the genocide of Rwanda miraculously, stepping on the dead bodies of my people, carrying my daughter on my back. I crossed 4 countries on foot. At the end, I came to the UK illegally, started a life in a country I did not know a language. English is my 5th language. A culture where the weather was different, as you may know, from Africa to the British weather. The culture shock, I went through all that. However, when I arrived in Europe, I realized that the war was not only in Rwanda. I saw many other crimes against humanity. There were terrorist attacks. There were shootings in schools in America. There were knives crimes. There were Syrian refugees all over in the news. Then I thought, when will this end? How can we break the cycles of such kind of violence? I did. In the West, I consulted many leaders. Even I met Princess Kate. I asked her, I had a breakfast with her, I asked her, what do you think about breaking the cycles of this violence? Is there any how we can invest our life for our generation so that our children can live peacefully? I did studies of peace building, atrocity prevention, counterterrorism in Switzerland. But still, I'm concerned about the pain we still see caused by man. What can we do to prevent such a kind of atrocity in our generation? There are many powerful nations. They could have prevented the genocide of Rwanda. They didn't. They had apologies in 2014 in the Netherlands that they failed to prevent the genocide. They could have protected the civilians. They were in place. UN was there. They didn't. They apologized. But still, our people, 800,000 people, out of 6 million, it was a good number in 100 days. They died. It's very painful. And I felt pain when I visited Maya's offices, where they host refugees, and I sat with women on Tuesday, with children. Some of them have lost their husband. They are there. Their children are traumatized. Thanks to Maya for the services they are offering. You do not know how this is affecting many generations. It affects generations. And there are so many stereotypes in the host societies, saying refugees should not come there. What would you do if you were in my situation, holding a child dying in your hands? I did. I left illegally. I came to the UK, and there are so many stereotypes that refugees are, they cannot do anything, they cannot amount to nothing, their children are a lost generation. That's wrong. My daughter came in England, though we did not speak the language. She got support. She did very well. She went into Cambridge University. She just finished her master's in Oxford University because of the support. I helped the Grenfell Tower victims when they were fired. As a trauma counselor, I used my experience as a survivor of genocide and as a trauma counselor, and I helped many. Because of that, I got an award from the British Parliament for my social impact as a refugee who came to the UK, and I've helped the community in peace building, but also in healing of such kind of trauma. So refugees they can bring input in your community, but we need to integrate them. We need to understand the reason why they came. Another thing also I would like to mention here, many organizations, as you have said many times, many organizations have dealt with the consequences of such kind of atrocities. We need to seek the root cause of those problems to break the cycles of such kind of violence. Thinking of the triggering events that led to the genocide of Rwanda, there has been hatred is the key. Also, lack of ethical governance for the leaders, lack of dialogue facilitation, we need to see that. So I am inviting many of you. I'm doing education on peace. We need to teach young people from the very early age the values of love, tolerance, equality, and respect of the other. So I would invite you to join me in a program I have with the Institute for Peace and Dialogue in Switzerland to engage our young people to break the cycles of violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Scilla Elworthy, after Rwanda, we said never again. After Bosnia, we said never again. After all these conflicts, we've said never again. Yet, in a place like Syria, the barrel bombs continue to fall, the mortars hit children, refugees are being created by the day, the Rohingya in Myanmar, and so on and so forth. Why don't we learn our lessons, and why are we finding it impossible to, we talk about solving the root causes, but why is it impossible to actually solve them?
Great questions, thank you. And I'm really glad to be here with you and see the interest in this audience in this subject, because it is vital. I don't think I can answer your question, but what I would like to do is frame what each one of us can do about these issues. Because the volume of migrants and refugees that we see today is going to increase exponentially. That is to say, climate change, and not only climate change, but violence from other issues that I will mention, what we're seeing today is like a little stream compared to a flood. So we have to be ready. And one of the things we can do is to ask those who are planning for our cities, and when I go home to England, I will ask in London this question, and I ask you to ask it at home, particularly here in Istanbul. What are the plans in place? What are the projections being made for when the oceans rise, but even when there is a huge climate catastrophe? What is being done? And it's our responsibilities as citizens to ask these questions. I want to move to another cause that is related to the one you were mentioning, which is the rich-poor gap. For how many people is that a familiar phrase, the rich-poor gap? Because it's widening every day. Do you know that now 8 billionaires control more wealth than half the world's population? That is a shocking statistic for our world, for our media, for our situation. So what can be done? We know from experience, I work currently with 1,800 locally led peace initiatives where people are using their skills to prevent conflict. So one of the things that can be done in this region is for people who have control of large industries and large wealth to create social entrepreneurs, to train them where they can bring renewable energy schemes, when they can bring water purification schemes, where they can bring agricultural schemes to areas that people would be migrating from, to make a constructive way in which people can stay at home and prosper. I want to give you a couple of statistics, and the first one is the one I'm really ashamed of for all of us. Do you know what we spend annually on militarization globally? $1,739 billion a year. $1,739 billion, when $31 billion would wipe out starvation worldwide. Imagine how many more people could stay at home.
Can I jump in there for a second?
Yeah.
Be devil's advocate. But then somebody would say, well, if you have a tyrant who's creating refugees, how else do you deal with this besides fighting and defeating that tyrant to stop the creation of refugees?
I think there are other ways of defeating tyrants, and this is equipping the population with the skills to rise up in ways they have tried and sometimes failed, but many times succeeded in removing a tyrant without introducing violence. Why? Because as ÖZSÜER has said, once you introduce violence, it escalates out of control. And then the consequences of that violence leave maimed individuals, not just physically but psychologically maimed individuals, like this little girl we saw on the screen. And healing that trauma will take 3 generations. So don't create more violence.
Can I ask you to bring in your next stat later on and fold it in? Because I want to go to our UNHCR representative for the moment. My apologies to the men on the panel. I'm not deliberately ignoring you, but I will get to you in a moment. Something, KATHARINA, that I thought of while Dr. Sylla Elworthy was talking. She mentioned the rich-poor divide and needing to create more jobs and opportunities for people and so on. There's a distinction being made almost ubiquitously that someone who's a refugee deserves, in the triage of helping, deserves more immediate help than somebody who's an economic migrant. Because people are leaving because life is terrible, there are no opportunities, some societies aren't in an active phase of war, but it's still intolerable enough to leave, right? Is that distinction a fair one as people, as nations, as states prioritize in trying to help people to say, well, sorry, your country is not burning to the ground right now. You're just an economic migrant, so you must go to the back of the queue.
That's really a question going to the basics, but this distinction is not a value judgment. It's a distinction in law, a legal distinction, and in short, this distinction is the result of the lessons learned of the world after the World War II. The 1951 convention was established, and the idea behind an international definition of a refugee and a specific legal status to which this person is entitled is the idea that a refugee has lost the protection of its country of origin instead of the protection of the country of nationality. International protection and a legal status needs to come in. That is not the case for a migrant who can turn to the protection, the diplomatic protection of the embassy, for example, which is not the case for a refugee who fears persecution from that very authorities of the country of origin. So that's a distinction in law. It's not a value judgment.
It's a distinction in law, but it's used as a value judgment, for example, by politicians, populist politicians, for example, in Europe, saying, well, statistically, the vast majority of these people trying to come to our countries are economic migrants. It's none of our business, nothing to do with us, lock the doors. How much more complicated does it make your work, for example?
That's now a completely different dimension, but
right.
Maybe to say that the world has also tried to learn on how to respond better, including in many situations, some of which you mentioned, where there are mixed movements. Refugees and migrants very often use the same routes, and as a result of an increase of such movements in 1996, all member states of the United Nations, and speaking of some new trends, hopefully, realized that there needed to be really an improvement in how the world responds to these movements, including these very mixed movements of people, because they have very often very similar immediate needs. As a result, there was a decision to work on two compacts, global compacts, one on refugees, because the solutions and the responses need to be different once these immediate needs are addressed, and one on safe, regular, and orderly migration. And these two compacts were adopted 2 years later, again by an overwhelming majority of the member states of the United Nations. And if you allow me just to highlight a few elements, some are found in both compacts, but some specifically in the refugee compact, and that we are now working on. Also, since the title is Some New Trends. One, I think, which is very important, and it was also mentioned by His Excellency from Jordan, is the states have confirmed, that doesn't automatically change behavior, but I think it's an important recognition. They have confirmed that protecting refugees is a shared international responsibility. Mm-hmm. Countries like Jordan, like Turkey, like Lebanon, they share what is a public global good on behalf of the international community, of all of us, which means that countries hosting refugees and the communities hosting refugees need to be supported better than they were to date. So one of the objectives, and I think that's a second very important conclusion coming from that realization that it's an international responsibility, not by coincidence of geography of countries adjacent to conflict, is that one of the first objectives of the Global Compact on Refugees is to ease pressure on host countries and host communities. So for the first time, we look beyond an immediate humanitarian response, and we have the basis to really mobilize resources and action in supporting with longer-term support host countries and host communities, not because they are development countries, but because they host on all of our behalf refugees, and they therefore need to be supported.
Is there a greater understanding now of the load, the burden? That's a very heavy word, but the load that has been carried by the likes of Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and so on. Is there a greater understanding now in the international community that they have done the bulk of the absorption of people and something needs to change politically?
Yes, and very concretely, that sets off also the possibility to mobilize different tools than to always look at humanitarian aid budgets and that are stretched to limits as the numbers have increased of people in need of protection. So it's, for example, mobilized development action. It's mobilized international financial institutions with instruments created to support host countries of refugees. And another important consideration there, and we do see that, another important consideration, new, and this panel also shows it, there is now the realization that it needs what is often referred to both a whole of government approach, but also a whole of society approach. So there is the realization that we need to mobilize actors that have not traditionally been the ones one looks at when responding to movements of refugees or mixed movements of refugees and migrants. So if I may, for example, the private sector. The private sector for a humanitarian organization like UNHCR was never really a stakeholder that we would look at, and we would try to engage from the very early days of a response. Now, explicitly, this in UN language, it's called a multi-stakeholder approach. The private sector is mentioned, academia is mentioned, development actors are mentioned, international financial institutions have explicitly now a role in responding to refugees. And refugees themselves and host communities are referenced. So there is an understanding both that we need to support the countries and communities that host refugees, and an understanding that it involves many more actors than only the humanitarian responders that we normally see in response to a refugee.
And of course, there's always a ceiling to humanitarian work until it is resolved on a political level, right? That's the reality of it all.
The response doesn't have to be humanitarian for years on end. What you also see is that more and more refugees, at the moment globally, 60% plus of the refugees don't live in camps. These classical pictures of refugee camps, they live among the host community. And here in Turkey, it's more than 98% of refugees that live within the cities, the rural areas. So also that shows that you cannot establish parallel humanitarian systems. You need to support the institutions that respond to the needs of both host communities and refugees, the education system, the health system. And that requires resources and responses that are beyond humanitarian. They are budget support to governments, that they are developmental in nature. So also that means that beyond an initial humanitarian response, when you have large numbers of people moving and they have their basic needs need to be addressed, you should, from the outset, mobilize these longer-term resources that look at both the needs of the refugees, but also the needs of the host communities.
Understood. I want to bring in Mohammed Ahmed Faris now, because, sir, you have a really extraordinary history as well. And I wonder, on a very basic level, as we talk about new trends, right? We talk about, to this title, if there's a shift, if there's a trend. There is talk of this idea that it could be time for Syrians to go back home. As a Syrian, as somebody who was within the system and then turned against the government as well, politically, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like it's an imposition? Do you feel like the time's not right? Do you feel the time is right? Well, how do you feel about your people being spoken about in this regard?
السلام عليكم. أنا رائد الفضاء السوري محمد فارس، اللاجئ مثل بقية اللاجئين على ظهر هذه البسيطة. لقد عشت تجربة اللجوء بكل ما في هذه الكلمة من أبعاد. لم ألجأ عن طيب خاطر، لم أخرج من وطني كما أي إنسان يحب وطنه، أرض آبائه وأرض أجداده، الهواء الذي تنفسه منذ طفولته، ولكن هناك إرغام وقهر واستبداد. قبل أن أخرج من وطني شاهدت الطائرات كيف تقصف بشكل عشوائي بلدي، شاهدت الصواريخ التي تضرب بشكل عشوائي، صاروخ سكود على بعد 300 كيلومتر يدمر حيا من أحياء مدينة حلب، يقتل الأطفال ويقتل الأبرياء. شاهدت بأم عيني كيف تقصف المدن بالكيماوي، بالمواد الكيماوية التي تقتل الأطفال. ولذلك كغيري من الأسر لا أستطيع أن أفعل شيئا أمام هذا الهجمة الهمجية البربرية التي طالت شعبنا وأهلنا في سوريا. كلكم يعرف ما هي سوريا. سوريا هي أرض الحضارة، 30 حضارة قامت على أرض سوريا منذ فجر التاريخ. ولذلك كل يخاف على أطفاله، يخاف على أسرته، ومع ذلك اضطررنا للجوء. أنا عشت هذه المرارة، هربت هربا لأنني كنت مراقب بشكل دقيق. طبعا زوجتي لا تحب كلمة اللجوء، ولكنها الحقيقة. لقد أصبحت من اللاجئين، هربت على الطرقات وفي البراري أنا وأطفالي، ودخلت الحدود التركية مع أني كنت ممنوعا من السفر، ليس لدي جواز سفر، ولذلك عشت مرارة اللجوء ومرارة المطاردة والاضطهاد. طبعا لن أتحدث كثيرا، الكل يعرف الآن ماذا يجري في سوريا. في سوريا لا توجد حرب أهلية، وإنما توجد ثورة، ناس قاموا ضد الدكتاتورية، ضد الظلم، ضد الاضطهاد، ضد سرقة مستقبل أولادهم وقوة قوت أولادهم. لن أطيل في الحديث، ولكن أمتلك الكثير من الأفكار حول هذا الموضوع، ولكن سأتحدث عن نفسي كلاجئ وما شاهدته من أهل شعبي، من أهلي ومن أهل وطني في بلاد اللجوء. طبعا نحن نشكر تركيا على استضافتها حوالي 4 مليون لاجئ سوري، ولكن اللاجئ يا أيها الناس، اللاجئ يعيش مرارة الحياة، قسوتها، يعيش الغربة، فقد أمه وأبيه وأهله، فقد وطنه، ولذلك هو وضع نفسي صعب وقاسي، بالإضافة بأنه جيبه فارغ من المال، وحينما لا يوجد لديه أي مال يعيش فيه فيكون الوضع أصعب وأسوأ. ولذلك هناك الكثير من السلبيات التي يعيشها اللاجئ، وخاصة اللاجئ الداخلي. كما قلت هناك الكثير من الأمور، ولكن يوجد حلول لهذا الموضوع بكل تأكيد. اللاجئ أنا مع الأسف هناك قيم إنسانية لكل البشر. بالنسبة لي كرائد فضاء لقد وجدت الأرض صغيرة جدا، وفي عصر العولمة التي نعيشها والتكنولوجيا الحديثة التي نعيشها مع الأسف الشديد أصبحت حياة الإنسان الفقير أصبح أصعب، وتم دعم الدكتاتوريات بشكل أوسع وأكبر. الأرض كما شاهدتها من الفضاء ليس لها حدود أبداً، ولذلك في القديم حينما كان الإنسان بدائياً مع الأسف الشديد كان يستطيع أن يعبر الحدود بدون جواز سفر، بدون بوابات، كما رأيتها من الفضاء الخارجي. أرضنا جميلة رائعة، جميلة بكل ما في هذه الكلمة من معنى. لم نرى من الفضاء البوابات، لم نرى حدوداً. لا يستطيع الإنسان أن يقول هذا بلدي وذاك بلدك. الأرض واحدة خلقها الله لتكون بيتاً للإنسان، الإنسان بكل ما في هذه الكلمة من معنى. لا فرق بين أبيض ولا أسود، بين أفريقي وأوروبي وأمريكي. لا يمكن أن نقول أنا تركي وأنا فرنسي وأنا سوري إنها أرض واحدة. ولذلك مع الأسف الشديد أكثر ما يغيظ اللاجئ هو النظرة العنصرية التي يراها، بالرغم أنه وضعه النفسي سيء ووضعه النفسي صعب ووضعه المادي صعب. العنصرية والنظرة أنك لاجئ، هذه النظرة تزيد من آلام اللاجئ بالرغم من كل الظروف الصعبة. طبعا هناك الكثير من البشر والكثير من الناس الذين قابلناهم يحملون كلمة الإنسانية بكل أبعادها وبكل معانيها، ولكن يوجد الكثير من الناس الذين يقولون بأننا كذا وكذا وأنتم لاجئون. بالطبع لن أتحدث عن الحياة المعيشية الصعبة التي يعيشها اللاجئ، الحياة إنه يريد أن يربي أولاده. أريد أن أركز على نقاط مهمة خاصة في بلاد اللجوء: التعليم، الغذاء، المأوى. وأنتم تحدثت السيدة عن 800 ملياردير موجودين حول العالم. ثوابكم العظيم الحقيقي أمام الله وأمام إنسانيتكم أن تقفوا أمام الإنسان الذي لا يستطيع أن يمتلك قوت يومه ولا يستطيع أن يعلم أطفاله، فما بالكم باللاجئين الذين هم في الداخل والذين سوف يأتي عليهم الشتاء فوهم بالخيام وتحت الأشجار ويتعرضون للقصف والإبادة. مع الأسف الشديد هناك دولة افتخرت بأنها جربت 300 نوع من السلاح. على من جربتهم؟ على الأطفال والنساء والأبرياء، بدل أن يقولوا بأنهم جربوا 300 جهاز علمي طبي زراعي صناعي في خدمة الإنسان. الإنسان هو غاية الحياة، الإنسان أنا درست الكون وكنت في الفضاء الخارجي. الكرة الأرضية التي نعيشها هي ذرة في هذا الكون، ليست أكبر من ذرة، ولكن الأعظم على هذه الكرة هو الإنسان. كما الإنسان الذي يعطي، الإنسان الذي يضحي، الإنسان الذي يساعد أخيه الإنسان. الحضارة يجب أن تتوسع مفهومنا مع تطور هذه الحضارة بالمفهوم الإنساني. كما قلت أن العولمة جعلت، كما بجلسة الأمس يتحدثون عن الاقتصاد وعن المال، هذا شيء جيد. يجب أن ينمي الإنسان حضارته، ينمي أمواله، ولكن يجب أن لا يتخلى عن إنسانيته أبداً. يجب أن يبقى إنسان بكل معنى الكلمة. الإنسان أخو الإنسان، الإنسان هو أكبر شيء في هذا الكون. الإنسان حينما أقتل طفل أنني أقتل كرة أرضية، لقد شاهدتها جميلة رائعة من الفضاء، والله هي أجمل شيء بهذا الكون. وقلت في أحد المؤتمرات الصحفية علينا أن نحافظ على هذه الأرض الجميلة، إنها أمنا، ولكن مع الأسف الشديد ندفع المليارات المليارات المليارات من أجل أن نصنع قنابل ذرية وهيدروجينية وصواريخ لقتل الإنسان وقتل البشر. أيها البشر، إلى أين أنتم ذاهبون؟ الحضارة الأخلاقية أولاً، ثم الحضارة المادية. إذا حضارة مادية بلا أخلاق ليست حضارة، إنها وحشية، إنها تخلف. مع ذلك كما قلت الأرض صغيرة والإنسان هو الكبير عليها. اللاجئ إنسان كما أي إنسان، قفوا إلى جانبه. ولكن أنا أركز على نقاط. الثقافة المجتمعية لأي دولة تستقبل اللاجئين هي مسألة مهمة للجمعيات المجتمع المدني والحكومي، حتى تعريف بأن هذا اللاجئ هو إنسان مثلك ومثله، وربما هو عاش حضارة، هو لا يريد أن يلتجئ، بالرغم أنه الدكتاتوريات والقمع والقهر والاستبداد هي التي أجبرته على اللجوء. أنتم تتحدثون عن كيفية مساعدة اللاجئين ومساعدة الدول التي تستضيف اللاجئين مادياً، مجتمعياً إلى آخره، ولكن أقول لكم حتى لا يكون هناك لجوء بالدرجة الأولى عليكم أن تساعدوا الشعوب التي تضطر إلى اللجوء، أن تساعدوها في بناء وطن حر ديمقراطي ليس فيه قمع ولا فيه استبداد. نحن في عصر أصبحت الدنيا مفتوحة، لم يعد يقبل أي إنسان على هذه الأرض بالدكتاتورية، لم يعد يقبل أي إنسان بالتسلط بسرقة أمواله. ولذلك أناشد المجتمع الدولي والأمم المتحدة أنها تركز الآن على قضية مساعدة اللاجئين. أرجوكم ركزوا على قضية مهمة جدا، ساعدوا الشعوب التي تعيش في ظل القهر والاستبداد والقتل الممنهج، ساعدوا الدول الفقيرة قبل أن يهاجر أهلها في البحار في الجبال. لقد مات الآلاف من أبناء شعبنا مع الأسف، حتى في الصحارى ماتوا وهم يهاجرون. هناك أسر ذهبت إلى القطب الشمالي وعبرت إلى فنلندا. لماذا؟ لأنها تعيش الألم، تعيش القهر. ساعدوا أيها المجتمع الدولي، أيتها الأمم المتحدة، ساعدونا في القضاء على الدكتاتوريات ولبناء أوطان حرة ديمقراطية. نحن في القرن 21 لم يعد أحد يتقبل الظلم والقهر والقتل. هذه هي الدرجة الأولى، ساعدونا فيها. نشكر كل من يساعد اللاجئين، سواء السوريين ولا الليبيين ولا المصريين ولا الأفارقة، نشكرهم من قلوبنا، ولكن بالدرجة الأولى ساعدونا حتى لا نهاجر، حتى نبقى في أوطاننا ونبدع في أوطاننا. نقطة أخيرة لن أطيل عليكم. حضرت أحد المؤتمرات عن المهاجرين، كان المؤتمرون يتحدثون عن المهاجر كأنه بضاعة، كأنه سلعة تطرقت، قلت سيولة قادمة. الإنسان ليس سيولة، الإنسان هو الإنسان ويبقى الإنسان. الإنسان هو كرة أرضية، كل واحد من البشر الإنسان يتحدثون عنها كبضاعة. تحدثوا عن إيجابيات حتى اللجوء. هناك الآلاف بل الآلاف من اللاجئين المبدعين والذين وضعوا بصمة حضارية لأنهم اضطروا ليثبتوا وجودهم في بلاد اللجوء. ولذلك علينا أن ننظر إلى اللجوء في البلاد التي يلجأ إليها الناس بأنهم إيجابيون. اللجوء الإيجابي، واللجوء هو ثقافة. اللجوء هو ثقافة جديدة لأي مجتمع يلجأ إليه اللاجئ، وتعرف على الإنسان بكل أبعاده وبكل معطياته وبكل وجوده. إذن أرجوكم ساعدوا الدول التي يهرب منها البشر من أجل أن يبقوا فيها، وشكرا لكم.
Thank you, sir. I want to ask NIGAR GÖKSEL from the International Crisis Group. We speak about the changes in the approach to migrants and refugees. This is an ongoing, evolving issue, ongoing, evolving story. It's almost the end of 2019. Have we gotten better at this? And when I say we, I don't even know what I mean by we. The international community, collectively. Are we getting better at this, or are we repeating the same mistakes?
I think Turkey is getting much better, and that Turkey's response to the very large scale of influx from Syria in particular has been commendable. In the first few years, there was a lot of disarray because how long they were going to stay was unknown. But as soon as it became obvious that, in the foreseeable future, there's not going to be a solution, well, foreseeable future. One needs to integrate the Syrians into society with a view to the fact that they may not be able to go back anytime soon. As soon as I think that realization was reached around 2016, 15, 16, really a fantastic job of integration has taken place. And a lot of the burden has been shouldered by Turkey. There, of course, is support from particularly the EU, but other international partners as well. But also an assumption sort of that as long as you pour money into Turkey, everything will be fine. It's not just a matter of money. And social cohesion has been a challenge, as much as there may be cultural continuity, let's say, between Turkey and Syria. It's not, there's also two different societies, two different cultures. Even people within Turkey, people within Syria have very different backgrounds and different sort of traditions and practices. So, it's been, I think, a very difficult process. And I'd like to highlight a couple of demographies that I think haven't gotten enough attention, and so maybe we could all do a little bit better with them. One is the sort of 15, 24-year-old Syrians. Currently 15 to 24-year-old, they came to Turkey at an age where they still can remember the war traumas. They remember what they lost, and they're also at an age that they can perceive their identity differences, their discrimination, the marginalization, the fact that they dropped out of school for a few years, most of them, came back, didn't understand necessarily because of their lost years, had a much more difficult time learning Turkish than their younger siblings who were much babies perhaps, and have identity grievances, as all teenagers do, are being sort of pressured by their families and by society to work, to make money, to get married, to stop being a burden on their families, or shamed for not fighting in Syria. I think there's that age group, which is not a very small one, in Turkey that needs much more attention, much more psychosocial support. I know the Maya Foundation is doing a lot, but that age group is also being exploited in the workplace by the destitution of a certain type of profile is very easily preyed upon, and stopping that is very difficult. So protection mechanisms are also important. Another demography that's important, of course, is women, particularly widows. I think they've faced a lot of exploitation and sort of being pushed into the margins of society. But I'd also like to raise the host communities. Because as much as we talk about the grievances and the exploitation and the problems of the refugees, I think it's also important to recognize that there are certain segments of the host community that have also carried an unproportional amount of the burden. For many of us, there hasn't, for much of the society, let's say, the refugees have actually brought more economic gains. They have more customers, they have cheaper labor, they don't have much to complain about. However, there's a segment of society, particularly the unqualified, unregistered workers that lived in low-income neighborhoods whose rent prices are going up, who have economic rivalry in the workplace, their salaries are going down, their children's classrooms got more crowded suddenly. They feel like they're the losers of 4 million people having inflowed into the country and settled in their neighborhoods. So I think it's important also to have empathy and to take into account the grievances, and I know international donors have been more and more doing that, have sort of a quota for the locals that have also incurred challenges.
It's easy to dismiss anybody who's anybody who has questions, or anybody saying, okay, there's a phenomenon going on here, to say, oh, you're xenophobic, you're racist, you're anti-refugee, right? That doesn't solve anything, does it? Because people don't get to actually speak their minds and find solutions.
And social cohesion that takes into account the needs and the grievances of all parties, I think, is important.
Right. Sharif Banna, the Somali-British poet Warsan Shires said, and my apologies to her in advance if I misquote her, but nobody puts their children in the boat unless they know the water is safer than the land. It's, again, almost the end of 2019. Collectively, do we have a better understanding of that, or do we still not get it, that people don't want to leave just because they want to leave, because they want to steal our benefits or something? They're leaving because they have to.
Thank you, Imran, for that question. I mean, whilst I was just listening to my fellow panelists and reflecting over some of the deliberations in even answering the question that you're referring to, I was just thinking about the word trends. And I think sometimes words and language are very important. And what we see is not just a trend, Imran. This isn't just a trend that's going to pass by. This isn't just something that, you know, will revive itself through a new phenomenon. These are realities. Our organization works in Greece, in Lesbos, where we are involved in search and rescue missions. And just to remind ourselves, the crisis is not going anywhere. It's not a trend, it's a reality. These are some of our own statistics from our own operations, from our partner organizations who we work with in Lesbos. In October 2019, there were nearly 1,500 immigrants, forced immigrants, refugees, who our team rescued at shore in Lesbos in 33 boats. In November 19, 1,665 arrivals in 40 boats. Just last week, we find refugees and migrants from Libya. Our team and our partner organizations rescued around 213 people across 3 operations. These are realities, not trends. I would also point out that, and again, I was just again listening to, I can't just help react to some of my co-panelists, to my good friend here, the astronaut and activist Muhammad al-Faris, that ultimately I think to answer that question of do we realize what it takes for parents to place their children on a boat, to move them from land to sea, it is an ethical consciousness, an ethical awakening that we all require. And I know we all speak about government policies, the UN, policymakers, regulators, and we need everybody in that discussion. But ultimately, what we are faced with is one of the gravest and most severe ethical challenges and dilemmas of our times. The issue of refugees, the issue of forced migration, the issue of internally displaced people is one of the gravest ethical issues of our times. And if we as individuals first do not reawaken our ethical consciousness, then we can speak about international communities for all day long. We can speak about governments in UN. But these are human beings at the end of the day. Governments are run by human beings. UN agencies are run by human beings. So I think it is about reviving our ethical consciousness and our duty towards humanity which needs to be discussed. And I think a panel like this, if you were to ask about a trend, I would say that this is a new trend to have a multidisciplinary, multi-perspective panel discussing a grave ethical crisis of our times, where you have researchers, an astronaut, a genocide survivor, someone from agencies like the UN, International Crisis Group, an artist. My own background is in an intersection between academia and the private sector, and now I'm in philanthropy. It does require a multi-dimensional, a multi-perspective approach where we all bring in what we offer to solve this crisis. Right. So I think this is definitely a new trend. It's happening here on stage. As for migration and forced migration, these are realities, not trends.
Right, and what is something invaluable from my perspective is that in these multidisciplinary panels of experts, we need the artist. We need the artist to remind us of our humanity. We need the artist to show us a mirror of ourselves, to look at our flaws, to look at our hopes, to look at our dreams. I'm not sure how much time I have, so I'm just going to check in with everybody before I move forward. Can I keep going? So we're going to go slightly over. Don't worry about it. HALİL ALTINDERE, I understand you want to show us a little video of some of your work before you begin speaking. Yes? Okay, so let's have a little watch and tee it up. It even includes Muhammad Ahmed Faris within it, so let's have a little watch of HALİL's work.
محمد فارس رائد الفضاء العربي السوري أعلمكم بأننا نمر لأول مرة فوق سماء بلادنا الحبيبة سوريا.
نعيد إعمار سوريا ونستطيع حتى أن نعيد إعمار كل كواكب المجموعة الشمسية. أتمنى أن نبني لهم مدن فضائية هناك حيث الحرية وحيث الكرامة وحيث لا استبداد ولا ظلم، ولكن دائما الإنسان يحن إلى بلده وإلى وطنه، وإن شاء الله سنعود إلى وطننا. إلى مارس، هناك حيث الأمان، هناك حيث الحرية. أين الحرية على الأرض؟ لم يعد هناك حرية، لم يعد للإنسان كرامة على الأرض.
سديم صار تقاسيم جاية من ثورة شعب عظيم. أنا غير كرامتي مملك قبل ما تعطيني الكملك. شوف منتجرين كامبوس وشوف but that's so fucking true. كشك يقولوا عأوروبا بس ما في مصاري بابا. برنيشة أريورم بس كله بيقلك سوريو. يرجو إذني ويلا عازم يرصر عزمي نفر بالمختصر. عادع وروح والدرب خطير بكرة لا بعده اشتفر. مع كل هالبشر لطفك يا قدر معقول البحر يصير تصير عبر معقول من شيم والغدر ليش شفت الالوان وكل شيء ازرق معقول عم بغرق يا بحر ارميني عم تليني بس بالله اتركني عايش سمعني البحر الهايج وفجأة صار اسمي ملاكة بس بايدي هوية خرطية اتينا مقدونيا وعلى صربيا على حدود ضربتني صحفية ولما راسي لا الارض تمنيتها تنشأ تبلعني كمل طريقي بقلبي غصة وغضبي عم يحرقني
I mean, we could spend an hour unpacking that, right? Which is fascinating in itself. But Halil, why is it so important for us to take a step back and have the artists reinterpret our reality for us, especially when it comes to issues of life and death, like the refugee crisis?
Merhaba, ben sanat öğretmeniyim, Halil ismim. Bu 4 tane izlediğiniz projeyi 2016 ile 2019 yılları arasında yaptım. Aslında her şey 2012'den itibaren farklı dönemlerde gazetede gördüm. Bir mültecinin Türkiye'ye yürüyerek sığınma haberini okuyarak başladı. Çünkü mültecilikle ilgili haberler o kadar zor çıkıyor ki gazete ve televizyonda insanlar artık kanıksanmış ve bir yerden sonra görmekten geliyorlar. Muhammed Faris'in hikayesi çok ilgimi çekti. Hem bu konuda farkındalık yaratmak hem de olaya sadece ucuz iş gücü işte ya da diğer sosyal konuların ötesinde geleceğe yönelik daha hümanist bakış açısı ve önerileri olan bir barış elçisi gibi pozisyonu ilgimi çekti ve kendisiyle tanışmak istedim. Yaklaşık bir yıl kadar onun hayatını verdiği konferanslar takip ettim ve bir film yapmaya karar verdik. Space Refugee ismiyle. Bu filmin önermek istediği konu şuydu. Bugün dünyada hiç kimse refüjileri istemiyorsa onları Mars'a mı yollayalım? Tabii bu ilk başta bir sanatçı kurgusu gibi gözükse dahi aslında bu olası bir durum. Bunun için NASA ile işbirliği yaptık. Bugün dünyadan Mars'a insan götürülen ne kadar maliyetler olur? Sosyal yönden, hukuki, mimari ve ekolojik yönden uzman insanlarla bu durumu tartıştık. İkinci izlediğimiz videoda ise Homeland. O da Suriye'den Türkiye'den Balkanlara, Balkanlardan en son durak olarak Berlin'e göç etmiş olan Suriyeli rap şarkıcısı Muhammed Abu Hajar'ın bireysel göç hikayesini rap müziğiyle, müzik yoluyla insanlarda farklı farkındalıklar yaratacak bir hikaye yarattım. Onunla yaptığımız işbirliğinde ise kendisinin bireysel hikayesi aynı zamanda bütün mültecilerin hikayesi gibi. Bu da umut barındıran, herhangi bir kültürel ve dil ve din açısından şeye uğramadan umut barındıran ve ileride mutlaka ülkesine dönmek istediğine ilişkin önerileri olan bir şeydi. Yani özet olarak aslında ben mültecilerle ilgili böyle sosyal konuşmalar yapabilecek bir yetide değilim. Sadece mültecilikle ilgili doğru pozisyonda olduğum insanlara sahne vererek onların o konuda konuşmasına projelerim ile birlikte onlara yer veriyorum. Bu şekilde ilerliyoruz. Son 2 projede ise Köfte Airlines. Bugün deminki bir önceki konuşmacının da işte göçmenlerin sadece kaçak feribotlarla dünyada göç etme durumun dışında bir hakları yok. Halbuki hem insan hakları beyannamesine bütün hukuki şeylerde insanların doğal afet ve bu tür savaş durumlarında herhangi bir ülkeye gitme özgürlüğü varken göç edememeleri hem kaçak yollardan hem de ucuz plastik botlarda Akdeniz'de boğulduğunu ve defalarca gördüğümüz bir şeyde. Tabi bunun açıklığı halde değil de bir Airbus'un üzerine gerçekten göç idaresiyle işbirliği yaparak 45 mülteciyi bir Airbus uçağın üzerinde aslında hiçbir zaman olmayacak bir şeyde Köfte Hava Yolları ismiyle bir uçakla yaptık ve bunu billboard olarak dünyanın birçok müzesinde dış mekanına gösterdik. Son videoda ise Neverland bu yılki Venedik Bienalinde gösterildi. Venedik Bienali dünyadaki sanat olimpiyatı olarak biliniyor. 100 yıllık bir geçmişi var ve her ülkenin bir pavilyonu var. Ben de bu kadar yoğun, yani İkinci Dünya Savaşı'ndan sonra bu kadar yoğun göçün olduğu bir dönemde vatansız sanatçılarla ilgili bir prezentasyon olsa nasıl olur diye düşündüğümde bir pavilyon inşa ettim. Amerika, Fransa, Belçika gibi dış görünümü aynı. Ama aslında yanına gittiğinizde bu binanın bir fasadında oluştuğunu, biraz da Muhammed Faris'in de az önce dediği gibi uzaydan dünyaya baktığında aslında sınırların, pasaportların vizenin olmadığı dönemde bugün günümüzde temsilin de aslında ne kadar tartışmalı bir konu olduğunu bu mimari projeyle anlatmaya çalıştım. Özet olarak böyle.
Thank you so much. And you know, the art speaks for itself, which is crucial. And I know that artists don't like to have to analyze the art. We don't have much time left. We have less than 5 minutes. So if my panel is okay with this, and I'm sorry for us getting to this point where everybody has not had a lot of time to express themselves or as much as they would have wanted to, I would like to, if everybody's okay with it, from the very end, moving towards me, get final comments from everybody, just to wrap us up. Very briefly, in a couple of sentences, if you don't mind. So let's start with NIGAR GÖKSEL, just as we put a button to this and wrap it up.
I mean, I think there is progress going on in the world, to go back to your point, at least the recognition that the burden needs to be shared. I think one point that we haven't discussed very much is the return issue and what needs to happen for people to return safely back to their homes. From what I understand from conversations with Syrians on the field is that safety, of course, is the most important thing, the fact that they need to feel like where they're returning to is safe, but also that they'll have rights and be represented. A third, of course, important thing is the economic livelihood. You need to have schools, you need to have jobs, you need to have post offices. I think there's a lot of work to do ahead, and when it comes to the issue of Syria at least, the one thing that we need to keep our eye on is making Syria altogether a place again that people would like to live in. And yeah, that's where I'll leave it. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Nigar. I want to go to Marie-Christine NIBAGWIRE. Briefly, please, ma'am.
I think what has been said by many of people here, to define our ethical consciousness should be our new trend. Also, how can we contribute to human dignity? We really need to engage this in our next generation. Many of us have failed, in the past have failed, but we have hope for our next generation. We should engage. We should teach our young people the values of love, tolerance, equality, respect of one another. And they will be the people to break the circle of such kind of violence against humanity.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. KATHARINA LUMPP.
Just two thoughts. One I mentioned, and I think was also underlined by others. What we really need is engaging the whole of society in responding to the needs and helping those that are worse off than us. And the second thought, and here I'm very happy actually to see that it's in the Turkish law on foreigners and international protection, is the idea of harmonization, harmony, to support foreigners, refugees, and Turkish citizens to live in harmony with each other. And that is an important, a very important idea, I think, and then also to remember in our engagement that while we are not the ones who may have the political solutions to conflicts, we are helping each other and individuals to solutions and to be in a better place. And I think that even if prospects look sometimes grim and pessimistic, that's not something to discount, and that engages really each of us at the individual level, no matter the organization.
I think they're going to bring security to take me out now very soon because I've run completely over time. If you don't mind, gentlemen, if you don't mind, I want to give Dr. Scilla Elworthy just 2 lines and then I'm going to wrap. My apologies. Yes.
Thank you. What I take back with me to my country is the lessons that Turkey has learned and can show the world on how to deal fairly and generously with refugees. But the key work that needs to be done is what the organization like Maya, and in Greece as well, are doing to resolve the trauma of children who have had to flee. Because if this is not resolved, the cycle of violence will go round again.
I'd like to invite ESRA ÖZSÜER back up on stage as we conclude, and I'd love to thank the panelists once again. Ma'am.
Thank you. Dear Imran, dear panelists, thank you very much for this very interactive, very interesting morning session. And for closing remarks, I have a very good friend here, a global citizen, a former banker, a former prime minister from Pakistan, and please, Shevkat Aziz, would you make a closing remark? Thank you.
I call myself today a last-minute addition, but actually I have a session after this and I was asked if I'd like to speak for 30 seconds or so. I've been listening with great interest the excellent session which just ended. Congratulations on how you put it together. I would just say that when you face tragedies in the world, and we've had our share of tragedies, it affects many stratas of society. And migration, which you talked about, and I will not go into the details today, is truly a human tragedy and a human event which disrupts the lives of people. They have to move when they don't want to, and they perhaps have to move to protect their lives or look for an economic future. The only one point I would add to what has been so eloquently discussed today is that in a crisis, we should also look for opportunity. And that means empowering the people to become more self-sufficient as they move from country A to B or area A to B, to find a way to sustain themselves, to find a way to educate and feed their families. And this means creating opportunity and looking for opportunity. So when transition takes place and migration takes place, the ecosystem around a family changes rapidly. So we need to focus on giving them a smooth landing and opening the world of opportunity to them. Believe me, no matter what skills you have or don't have, every human can look for some opportunity somewhere around their society. So if we can focus on the positive side too, after the fact, people have moved from point A to point B, I think we will be leaving them equipped to face the challenges of the future and to look for opportunities. So it changes an adversity into an opportunity. And that we could talk about for an hour, which I will not do, good news. But just leave it to you to, as you walk out and think about what happened today, think of creating opportunity for these people. Now let's look at the positive. And from that we can learn and set up a system or set up an environment for these people that they have a future like every human on earth deserves. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can go back if you want. So such a diverse group really, I think, is the solution to find for this global so-called problem. So I'd like also His Excellency Al-Fayez to make the last remark before they really are going to take us out of this room. And thank you for all your participation this morning.
I will be very brief. Mr. Garda has asked a very important question. What is the way out? And Dr. Al-Worthy has mentioned the military expenditure. It's about $1.6 trillion every year. So this is a huge amount of money. And I think there is hypocrisy here. When Western powers deal with countries, third world countries, they don't care about if this country is ruled by a dictator or by a democratic system of government. They look after their own interests. So there is hypocrisy here when you deal with these countries. So I think if the Western powers, the 5 members of the Security Council, plus the other wealthy countries in this world, they spend more on solving the problems of poverty and unemployment, then I think we will have a way out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. If you could please remain on stage briefly, because we will have plaques of appreciation presented to you by Ms. ÖZSÜER. And dear guests, right after this, we will have a very special guest delivering a speech, so please remain in the room. Siz veriyorsunuz. Thank you very much.